Hello, everyone. Good morning from Australia to everyone who's joining in from different parts of the world. And good day and good evening if you're in different time zones. Just make a few adjustments here. While I'm doing that, just if people could give me a thumbs up if you can hear and see me okay. That's better. Great. Terrific. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see lots of thumbs up. So we've just changed our clock time here. We've moved forward by 1 hour, welcoming in spring. So hopefully that hasn't confused anyone in other time zones. But it certainly changes the time, especially if people in the Northern Hemisphere are going back an hour. So it makes a further 2 hours difference. It might work for some people, but it might make the live stream too late for others. Very good. So it's good that so many people are tuning in to listen and practice the Dhamma. Just before we begin the meditation, I thought I would just speak a little bit. And for some reason last night, when I was just opening my mind to this stream that was happening this morning, the 5 hindrances came up as a subject to perhaps talk about a little bit. The 5 hindrances in the Buddhist teaching, they're called in Pali Nivarana. They're a short list of things that are agitations of the mind that are usually always going on one way or another, subtly or more grossly, when the mind isn't settled in its more natural state, a kind of unified in a more natural state. So we tend to think that, the restless mind, the agitated mind, the busy mind, the active mind is the normal state. Whereas the masters tell us actually the natural state of mind is more peaceful, more unified, when it's not disturbed, when it's not whipped up by these particular hindrances. So the derivations of the greed, hatred, delusion, or what we call the root, unwholesome states, if you like, that keep the mind in a state of suffering in one form or another. But these states of mind, these influences in the mind are not native, not necessarily native. They don't have to be there. They're conditioned experiences, they're impermanent experiences. And when grasped, when clung to, when identified with, this is where we give them energy, we identify with them, and we keep them in a way. They stay active in the mind and gather to some degree their own momentum through this energy that we give them, which is much like feeding a fire. We're still having a fire here sometimes at night in the house because it's cool still. And, to keep that fire going, you have to keep feeding it a log of wood every now and again. And that keeps it going. And the Buddha made a direct analogy with this metaphor of fire. If you just let it be, it will go out, it will run out of fuel. But as long as we keep feeding it, log of wood or some twigs, it'll keep burning. So that's what we have to see in the mind, how we keep feeding this, the movement in the mind, particularly the unwholesome states, through clinging, through identification, through not understanding actually what they are. So just to briefly mention, I mean, the Buddha was a great analyst in a way, and in his day, writing wasn't the norm with regards to learning, hearing, listening to, understanding spiritual teachings. The spoken word was. So the old scriptures are formulated in a way that are easy to remember, lots of mnemonics within there. So the 5 hindrances, 5 fingers on your hand, you can easily remember sense desire, aversion, restlessness, worry, agitation of the mind, dullness or torpor, and doubt, what's called skeptical doubt. So these are the 5 movements of the mind that we need to start to recognize, to see how they come to be, and to see how they can be allayed as well when we identify them with awareness, recognize they're not who and what we are. They're not states that are worth feeding, continuing to feed, because they just disturb the mind and create more suffering. They're suffering states in and of themselves to some degree or another. And when we stop feeding them, or when we fully recognize, this state has arisen, it's impermanent, it's not worth feeding, not worth clinging to, not who and what I am, it's actually quite ephemeral. And when we see through into its true nature, it's quite flimsy, nothing really substantial. And so these things die out, they peter out. And once they quiet, much like the wind of a storm passes through, the atmosphere quietens down, the leaves on the trees settle, the noise stops, the dust is no longer kicked up, and you experience more of a clarity and a stillness, which are, natural qualities of the mind when it's not stirred up by these hindrances. So needless to say, the natural stillness, calm and clarity is inherently more pleasant than these stirred up states. We still have to be aware, or awareness actually is also a natural quality of mind. But that clarity, as that clarity emerges, that's the expression of awareness, really. So we see things clearly as they are, phenomena of body and mind with this natural clarity. But even to cling to that, to identify with that, this is the real me, some kind of egoic identification, or not wanting this kind of space to change back to agitated space, etc. This is also a form of clinging. But as the mind settles, we see these subtle forms of clinging more and more, and we see the subtle suffering or dukkha within that clinging as well. So the awakening process is that one of recognizing states, mind states, the wholesome and the unwholesome, recognizing what the identification and clinging is when it happens. It gives rise to dukkha in that moment. And allowing it to settle out all by itself, because they are impermanent states. So to practice, recognizing these states is so helpful. I remember in my early years of practice, I kind of didn't want to know about the hindrances because they didn't sound very pleasant. I just wanted the wisdom, the truth. I wanted those, pith teachings that brought light and inspiration and clarity. But without recognizing the hindrances that are actually at play in the mind, we rarely experience what it's like to be beyond them or to have them settle out, which is really where the progress or understanding in the practice develops. Direct experience, not just to intellectually grasping at the inspiring or the beautiful, but to actually look at the grit and the difficulty, but in a way that you're seeing it just what it is. Your refuge is in awareness itself. And when we see these factors, that is the undermining of delusion, that seeing, that knowing, which evolves into understanding, sometimes quite quickly, sometimes more slowly, is what undermines the ignorance, undermines the grasping, undermines the clinging. So letting go happens through clear seeing, a recognition of not only the conditioned experiences of mind, the things which come and go, pleasant or unpleasant, but in the same recognition, there's an understanding, a recognition of the unconditioned nature of mind. So it's a little Dharma reflection with, I guess this is a good place to start before our meditation, because really as we enter into meditation, this is where we're going to, as I said, the hindrances are active. When the mind isn't settled, they're usually active to some degree or another. So we'll see them in various forms. So our practice is just to know, just to see. That was the victory of the Buddha. I see you, Mara. I know you, Mara. You don't struggle with these things or try to fight them or try to get rid of them. But in the seeing, there is the dispelling. So let's get ready for the meditation. Just get a time check up. We'll meditate for about half an hour, 25 to 30 minutes. And I'll ask people to refrain from using the chat box through the meditation, just so you can stay focused. And then after the meditation, there'll be an opportunity for some questions into the chat. And we'll see where we go. Okay, so whether you prefer to have eyes open or closed, that's fine. If they're open, just let your gaze lower a little bit. And if you're more at ease with eyes closed, that's fine too. Now don't at this stage attempt to do anything to create a meditation state. Just feel what it's like to be with that first instruction to either close your eyes or lower your gaze. There's already in that approach very minimal instruction. You might notice more of an awareness of the body itself, awareness of physicality, of sitting. And an awareness of the silence between my words as we move into a more contemplative exercise. Just as much as what I say Perhaps what I don't say, the silences between the words, are as important to tune into, to recognize awareness in the silence between words and in the space within and without. So mindfulness of body is just this establishment of awareness in the present, and particularly aware of the body, how the body is experienced in the present, the posture, the sensations, various sensations of the body. And the movement of the in and out breath. As the body draws in nutriment from the air and expels carbon dioxide, the spent nutriment of the air. So just allow yourself to relax around these perceptions. And if the mind, thinking mind, is still activated with what you'd been doing previously or thinking about tomorrow, just recognize the energy of that is present. But try not to feed it so much. So we can see that that movement of the mind, it's an expression of restlessness. A kind of feels like a fueled thinking activity. What is it to not feed that? To witness it, to know it. Just let it be. And to subtly shift your attention to an experience of the body, such as the sensations of the breath or the sensations of sitting. Just to help ground the mental energy and to allow the body and the mind to relax naturally. So we're just sitting and noticing, being there. And using the body sensations as a kind of anchor, a touchstone, to stay present, to not have attention continue to run with the stream of thinking. can let your attention flow with the flow of the breath sensation. Quite a pleasant, simple flow of more subtle activity. Now, if you're noticing any resistance or struggle, see if you can become aware of the quality of that. What is that struggle or resistance? Or if there's a pulling or pushing kind of experience within. Usually within that experience of struggle, there's the play of desire and aversion, not wanting something that's present, wanting something that's not present. We just want to notice that. Maybe it's a trying to make the mind peaceful, not wanting to feel agitated or upset. And in the seeing and the knowing, we can just breathe with that experience in full awareness and let it settle all by itself. Don't engage it, don't struggle against it. Just know it as it is. And breathing with it without hanging on helps you recognize the breath and let go. You may recognize a calmness of mind emerging. Feels good, feels relatively peaceful. You can feel the natural relative pleasure of that compared to restlessness or worry. We simply know that as it is, without trying to keep it, get more of it, own it, commodify it. It's just a natural condition. Let it be as it is. And we can notice if there's still subtle levels of disturbance in the mind. Is there any sense of confusion or a kind of doubt or wavering? like a feeling of trying to find the answer to a question of some kind, a searching. Just know any of this subtle movement if it's present, breathing with it, not fueling it, letting it be in full awareness, and watch it dissipate. So a mind that's not accustomed to spending time in more subtle states with silence and stillness will tend to start looking for stimulation with thoughts. It'll tend to start seeking some interesting experience internally. And we can notice that as well. We can train this mind through this kind of practice to recognize stillness and spaciousness as the mind begins to open, settle, unify. By noticing those states, attention can actually learn to settle there. And awareness and mindfulness can see more subtle layers of experience. And become ever more restful within the observation, the witnessing, or awareness itself. You can start to notice the residual movement of the mind might be experienced as flickering thought activity, moments of body sensation appearing and disappearing. We continue to just know these experiences as they appear and disappear. Just don't interfere, let them be as they are. And trust in this knowing awareness. As we settle more in meditation, we may just be aware of the subtle movements. We might recognize where there's some tension, residual tension in the body or mind. As soon as it's seen, it's relaxed. It's the kind of refining of effort and energy in meditation. It's just a balancing through seeing and knowing. On the mental level, we might see the emergence of the I thought in some subtle form or another, claiming a particular experience or a subtle form of location in time and space and relative reality. These experiences also emerge and disappear. There's nothing you need to hang on to or push away. Whatever the expression of body mind, they all appear and disappear. Whether it's more gross or subtle, pleasant or unpleasant, wholesome or unwholesome. These in themselves are subtle judgments or perceptions that don't need to be held on to. Sound can come and go. Thoughts of I or me can come and go. Body sensations appear and disappear. As the mind settles, it'll naturally see and let go of finer levels of clinging and identification. It doesn't have to be done by you. It's a natural progression. If you still feel a sense of location in the head around the eyes, just recognize that. It's like still a strain of looking as if through the eyes, even with your eyes closed. Allow the looking in such an outward direction to relax. There's nothing to see here in that way. You may notice residual desires to get something out of this meditation, to find something or become something, or to find the sweet spot of resting. Just notice that if it appears. Let it be. Let it go. No need to find anything or look anywhere. Just be. So just noticing what's happening now. And as we draw this meditation to a close, just notice if there's any wanting or not wanting with regards to this experience or some future imagined experience. Notice the subtlety of desire, either wanting something not to change, wanting something to change. wanting continuity, wanting cessation, ending. Just notice. And in your own time, come back into this shared space of the live stream where people are welcome now to put questions into the chat, and we can talk more about the Dharma, about practice. So I'm just running the chat back. Great. So, someone has asked, how important is it to realize non-duality on the path to overcome suffering? Well, just to recognize, say, this concept of non-duality, it's an idea at this level. How important is it to realize non-duality on the path? The path is about recognizing, learning what is. Duality, non-duality, they're words that point to our experience. So we have to recognize what our experience is. Duality, in its essence, it's two-ness, isn't it? Dual, not one, two. And this is pointing to the experience of subject-object. There's a me here and a world out there. This is me, that's you. It's kind of separation between subject and object. So that's a concept, but we have to recognize what is that in our own experience. How do we experience that? And non-duality is, those moments in experience where we drop out of that duality. Usually just for a moment, there's a feeling of non-separation, or sometimes expressed as oneness. And this is a bit confounding for the dualistic mind because having experienced it, the dualistic mind searches for it again, but it can't find it because it's operating in a dualistic, looking for something, looking for an experience, an object, or something out there. So it's in the moments of the search dropping out that we experience what we call non-duality or non-separation, and generally refers to the basic nature or true nature of mind is non-dual. So that's what I was talking about in the beginning. The nature of mind is actually peaceful. True nature of mind is already peaceful, as Ajahn Chah said. It gets stirred up, whipped up by the winds of the movement within the mind, is stirred up by the winds of greed, hatred, delusion. So much like the weather, when it's windy, when the storm is passing through, we can't get out there and try and stop it. We might not like it, we might wish it was some other way, we might wish it was perfect, calm weather, but the storm's here. So you have to figure out how to accept that condition as it is. because it's pointless fighting it. It's a passing condition that has its own causes for being as it is. It's impermanent, it's changing. So there's the suffering of that state appearing if it's something you don't want, and then there's the suffering of trying to make it different when it is the way it is. Two levels of suffering. So finding out in your own experience, what is it to be with the way things are without making that suffering? And what is it when conditions end in your own experience, when conditions change? This is how it's to be understood, how practice and path is understood. So obviously recognizing the unconditioned or the non-dual nature of mind, it's a key aspect. But you can't make that experience happen, you can't find it by looking. Nevertheless, it is the nature of the mind. Basically, the path is learning how to recognize conditions and stop fighting with them, because that's just feeding the fire, throwing more logs on the fire, keeping it going. But you have to realize that for yourself, because there's very subtle ways that the mind of desire and aversion does that. So we need to look and see and learn skills of how to let the mind settle naturally. And recognize awareness as our true refuge and as the basis of reality anyway, always present. Okay, once one realizes that all forms are appearance, how are we to conduct ourselves in the world? Go with the flow and do meritorious deeds, as Buddha said, spread love and light like the greats? Well, they're beautiful concepts and ideas. So on the level of concepts, that's the way to go. On the level of reality, we meet things as they are. And if one has realized that forms are appearance, which means that all that appears is impermanent, stays for a time and disappears under its own laws of karma, we don't ignore the world. We don't operate on a set sense of what I should do and what I shouldn't do, but the realized heart responds compassionately and wisely to things as they are in the relative world, but with the wisdom and understanding of the true nature of things on the relative and the conditioned and the unconditioned, and without making those into two either, into another kind of subtle duality. So you don't have to worry about it at this point, but when one realizes, then that response to things as they are, in a way you could still say that, each individual may respond slightly differently, but the realization, if one is fully realized, then the wisdom and compassion is really the essence of the mind that responds to whatever is needed. But there will still be a degree of, let's say, personality conditioning to some extent within each individual's response, even if they're fully realized. Even as the Buddha praised the qualities of his enlightened disciples, they all had different qualities. They were all had strengths and lesser strengths, let's say. So their expressions and responses in the world were according to that situation. Great, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the meditation. What is the name of the creature I can hear chirping in the background? Well, it would have been one of the birds, the chirping. I think it was a magpie. Mostly their warbling is the main thing in the morning. The birds are waking up here and enjoying a sunny day, sunny spring day. I'm pretty sure it was mainly the magpie. Jaisara is listening in her kuti, so she might have a sense of if there were other birds there. Torin asks, in regards to the 5 hindrances, can you talk on how to identify dilution? I'm not sure what you mean by dilution. Do you mean dissolution? As when these expressions dissolve? You can clarify that a bit, Torin, if that's not correct. I'll just... but otherwise I'll speak to dissolution. How to identify dissolution? Dissolution is when conditions end. So if there's a subtle desire in the mind, you recognize it through the wanting. There's a subtle tension and maybe a sense of looking for something. But as soon as you recognize that in your meditation, somehow the recognition and awareness allows that tension of looking for something else, kind of this leaning into some idea or something else. It's a subtle movement out of the present moment, a direction. And when it's recognized, it's dissolved. It just opens out. It's really the ignorance, the not knowing, the unawareness within the mind that allows these habitual patterns of mind to continue to move. So it's like with unawareness, there's a momentum. There's clinging that's underneath the threshold of awareness. It's a subtle fueling. It's like when you're not looking, the kids are putting more wood on the fire when you're wanting it to go out. But when you're and seeing, when you're aware, the little gremlins don't do it. Oh, it's interesting that. So awareness in itself undermines, just like the light, when the light is shone into a dark room, the light itself dispels the darkness. Shadows or the darkness is not a thing in itself, but is dispelled with the light. So this is another kind of nice metaphor of awareness dispelling ignorance and the activity that goes on within that unawareness. Like I said, the Buddha's victory against Mara, which in the scriptures, Mara was a personification of delusion. When the Buddha was awakened and Mara tried to trick him into not teaching or passing away before he taught others, he just said, I know you, Mara. I know you so well now. It's not, you're not deluding me anymore, basically. Just the light of wisdom, the light of awareness sees. And so it can't be deluded. It doesn't cling. It's not identifying. It has this. One of the Vajrayana Dzogchen teachers, I think it might be Padmasambhava, there's this, can't remember the phrase exactly, but basically the nature of the mind is a completely open transparency. That's the true nature. So everything is seen, nothing that appears in the mind is opaque anymore. It's transparent. So this is another way of describing that experience of emptiness or insubstantiality. Though appearances may still manifest, with a fully awakened mind, they're completely transparent. So the illusion of substantiality is seen through. So Jaya Sara was clarifying there were not only magpies, we had corellas, which are quite screechy cockatoos, parrots. We had some whip birds going. You get that lovely whip. Wattle birds, which are a little bit squawky. They were all singing this morning. So the magpies warble, the corellas screech, the whip birds have this whistly whip, and the wattle birds are a little more chatty and screechy. Okay. Why is it so hard to restart a habit and start one? Meditation practice. So I guess you're saying you're trying to restart meditation, but you're finding it harder than when you first started meditation. Perhaps that's the question. Everyone's different. Hard to restart a habit. Depends what the habit is. You might have some preconceptions now about meditation. Maybe you had some more difficult experiences in the past. You didn't find it very satisfying or fulfilling, which is, quite natural in the early stages and middle stages of practice. It can be quite difficult to sit with oneself, to sit quietly, because you're not just sitting quietly, the body's sitting quietly, but the mind might be going mad all over the place. That's not pleasant to sit with, is it? So that is one way in which it's harder, because we have preconceptions or expectations that this won't be pleasant. But also why it's hard to sit is momentum, this becoming energy, the doing energy, the getting energy that fuels the mind, fuels desire, where our modern lives are very busy and we're propelled by a lot of doing, getting, planning, looking ahead, and that energy is the main habit, the energy of becoming. So meditation is attempting to sit still with that, to not follow that becoming energy for a while. So that can feel a little hard initially. You'll even feel resistance. I can't sit, don't want to sit because there's this forward moving. But if you recognize that, oh yeah, that's just the becoming energy, it would actually be very good to sit or be still with this, even for 10 minutes if you can manage it. And let go of any expectations. Actually think of it more as letting your body rest and letting your mind rest for even 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And don't try to do anything else. Don't make meditation into another doing, because that's painful. There's already so much to do. It's really let yourself have a break. Can you make 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or more in your day just to give yourself a break, to stop, at least allow the body to stop and let the mind to rest in that stopping. And even if the mind learn to develop a skill of mindfulness of body, which is just allowing you to be present with the body as it is, and that in itself allows the mind to keep dropping out of the futurizing, the becoming, even if it's just momentary in that space. So I hope that helps, Jen. John asks, the desire to create something with one's gifts to bring wealth and lifestyle, how to discern between purpose and mind fulfillment? Well, I think, recognizing the gifts one has in this life, whatever your skills are, um, creative skills or however they're expressed, we obviously have to, earn a living in life. I think it's good to discern what you're good at, what you like to do, and if at all possible, to create or get into some kind of work that allows you to develop that and enjoy that and feel a degree of fulfillment within that. This is, quite important in life. If you're pushing yourself into work that you really don't like, it's not going to serve you very well or even others very well. So, using your powers of wisdom and discernment to work with things as they are in terms of what's available, what's possible. You don't always land in something that is ideal. In fact, ideal is just that. It's very rare, but even when you land in an ideal situation, that doesn't always stay the same. It changes. It's not within one's control. Responding with wisdom to things as they are, whilst balancing that with a wholesome sense of utilizing your gifts, serving others, recognizing what brings benefit and what brings harm, both within oneself and in relation to others and in the world. It is a matter of discernment. Sometimes it's a matter of experimentation, trial and error sometimes. But keep things light. Don't get too heavy about life and the things we need to do, but try to bring lightness into your day. It's all a momentary unfolding, really. Learn how to let the past go and the future not become some burdensome ideal that we're grinding towards. Bring that lightness and joy to your daily interactions and the things we engage in, and you'll find the secrets to suffering and the end of suffering, within that direct experience. So Pasika is saying, I'm wondering why awareness is sometimes called loving awareness, and is awareness synonymous with Nibbana or ultimate reality? When there's full realization, a full knowing, a full awareness, a full understanding, then awareness, unmanifest knowing, is synonymous with Nibbana, ultimate reality, or the nature of mind, unconditioned awareness. That's when it's fully realized. When it's fully realized is synonymous with Nibbana. Why is it sometimes called loving awareness? I actually haven't heard it called loving awareness, but it is, awareness as the natural state, and particularly as a fully realized state. It is naturally loving. That's the compassionate aspect of mind. And this you can't really explain. It's something that is recognized. It's free of suffering, and it's naturally compassionate. Imagine it, just use your imagination for a moment. If everyone in the world, their minds were free of suffering, would they want to cause harm to anyone? Would they act out of anger or stupidity? The natural expression is lovingness, and the masters confirm this. At the beginning of the meditation, you spoke of not creating a meditative state at this point. In my personal meditation and yogic practices, breath postures, I've recognized benefits in getting into a meditative state. Just curious from your perspective how creating a meditative state goes about. So when I say that at the beginning of the meditation, because usually quite often people think when I say let's start the meditation, okay, now we're going to do something. I'm going to watch my breath. I'm going to make my mind quiet. I'm not going to. So these kind of setting up, I am going to do something special, and then the assumption I am going to experience a different state. These are assumptions and expectations and agendas. So I'm just bringing awareness to that by saying, don't try to create anything special. Don't try to do anything here. Or actually just want to relax into the present moment as it is. So-called meditative state. There's different ways you can talk about that. Meditative state is actually a natural settling of the mind. We can call it a state or not a state, but the more you aim to set something up in a particular way, one could say the more it is conditioned and there's more attachment there, there's more. We can develop good habit, a strong habit of mind of setting up and getting into meditative states, but they're not necessarily accompanied with an open, transparent awareness. So this might be the difference between, finely concentrated states, so-called, as opposed to a natural, open settling of the mind. I know they make these distinctions in the Advaita tradition, depending which teacher is speaking and how they speak about that. But from my own experience, I'm just saying this because meditation states, non-meditation states, these are just concepts and ideas. And to really settle in the power of awareness, I've found it much more helpful to settle naturally without trying to set anything up. So yes, practices and breath and postures can really work to settle the mind, concentrate the mind, to bring the power of mindfulness, concentration, attention. Doing these yogic practices, they can settle the body in a particular way. And so I'm not dissing that in any way, if it works for you. But at some point, you'll recognize awareness itself, perhaps, depending on the processes in your approach. But it's possible to have very refined samadhi and not realize non-dual awareness. And in fact, many teachers can point out the dangers to their students of a mind habituated to conditioned samadhi and the need for investigation to recognize true nature of mind and to see beyond the subtle movements of clinging in the mind. So there are different approaches in this way. So hopefully that helps explain what I was intending there. And from your experience in that meditation, you could consider, did your meditation subtly become more refined in that guidance I led this morning? And would you call that a meditative state or not compared to your other practice? That's just something for you to explore. And Marie asks, are awareness, consciousness, and Buddha mind synonymous? Depends who's speaking and what they mean by awareness, consciousness, and Buddha mind. In the ultimate sense, when we're speaking from ultimate non-dual reality, we can use the words awareness, consciousness, and Buddha mind as synonyms. Buddha mind or Buddha nature, nature of mind. In other contexts, awareness and consciousness might mean something different. Consciousness is usually the translation of vijnana, sense consciousness, in the Buddhist Pali tradition, which is more of a limited recognizing moments of sense consciousness with sense impression, like hearing and discerning magpie, hearing and discerning whipbird or corella. These are moments of sense consciousness to be discerned as the function of consciousness. And one could say the field of spacious awareness within which such consciousness is ceasing, appearing and disappearing, is a finer definition of awareness versus consciousness. But they're not truly different. These moments of sense consciousness in essence aren't separated from awareness itself as a non-dual awareness. But it's not the same either. So this is to be known directly for oneself. Buddha mind is like a synonym. Buddha means awake or awakeness or awakened. The mind which is fully awake is fully aware and knows the states of limited consciousness, dualistic consciousness versus non-dual consciousness or awareness. So words are very flexible depending who's speaking, who's defining what we mean by those words. Francis, is the self something that you notice and that passes like thoughts, sensations, and perceptions, or is it that which notices, even as a non-dual awareness? Once again, it depends on which tradition you're coming from when we're talking about the self. So this term, the self, in the Advaita tradition, if it's with a capital S, the self, that in the Advaita tradition is referring to the non-dual awareness and nature of mind. If it's self with a small s, it's referring to the ego sense of self, which is conceptual creation and dualistic. And in that sense can be noticed as passing, like thoughts, sensations, and perceptions. The dualistic ego sense of self is ultimately a thought construct, a projection of mind, and it can be seen to arise and cease when the mind has become subtle and clear. Just that sense in the meditation of I am this, I am that, I want, I don't want, searching for something. It makes an appearance. And if the observation or the awareness is clear in the mind, it's seen to arise and cease. And that sense of self that appears with it, the I-ness, minus, me-ness, rises and falls, disappears. And in its disappearing, that dualistic sense of separateness or location also disappears. It can be known to disappear. So, whereas in the Pali Buddhist tradition, you'll get self with a small s is usually that which is always impermanent, the ego sense of self. The Buddha from the Pali scriptures doesn't use the term self with a capital S. to refer to non-dual reality. He rather just uses the terms deathless, unconditioned, unmanifest, nibbana, the highest truth. There's many epithets he uses for that non-dual realization. But in his line of teaching, he did not use that term self in that other way. And I think there were good reasons for that. He was a very rational, pragmatic approach and preferred to analyze in terms of cause and effect, the conditioned reality, in order for it to reveal that which is unconditioned. And he tried his best not to put any more tags onto that reality, but constantly directing people to know and see what obstructs that realization in order for the true nature of mind or reality to be revealed directly. Anyway, we're always learning about the limitations of words and concepts and applied meaning. The words are pointers, the finger pointing to the moon. They can never capture reality. They usually capture an idea or a concept of projected reality. Reality in its truth can only be known directly by the mind itself, which is the real. Okay, curious if you have any comments about the popular idea of calling on spirit guidance, where visualizing or feeling the presence of benevolent beings seemingly outer experience. I think it's a way people, I have no view really with regards to whether this is good or not good. I think it can be a way for people to connect with their more intuitive sense and connect with benevolence in the universe. I think there are benevolent beings on all levels, manifest and unmanifest, and in between manifest and unmanifest. And in the Buddhist tradition, sometimes we call on all the benevolent beings to support particular situations. And sometimes we call on all beings, benevolent and even non-benevolent, malevolent, to hear the Dhamma, to contemplate the truth. But connecting, intentionally connecting with the presence of benevolent beings, I think it's a way to connect with benevolence within yourself. The true nature of mind is actually inherently benevolent, as I was saying earlier. So this can be a step in guidance, inspiration, with intuitive awareness, intuitive wisdom and compassion. So it can be good. But there can also be a fair bit of delusion in that if we're, in different ways. I know you can imagine that. But it's essentially good. There's nothing unwholesome at all about connecting with the power of benevolence. In fact, it's a very, very wholesome thing to do, whether we perceive it as within or without. It's intending the mind to goodness and beseeching the power of goodness to become manifest in the world. Natasha says, is this how it is meant to be? I'm aware of observing, dropping in and out of experiencing quiet and stillness and the arising thought. Observer is calm with this. Is it this simple? It is this simple, Natasha. It is. Just to be aware. And you'll find within meditation, At times you'll lose that awareness. You'll kind of wake up to those moments where you're caught in a stream of thinking about tomorrow or yesterday, past or future, or just daydreaming. And that waking up moment is really important. That's the waking up. It's as simple as that. And in the waking up, one drops out of that stream of thinking. The waking up itself dispels the illusion, being caught in a stream of projecting about the future or recreating the past in some conceptual way. So you're waking up to the present, and in that waking up, we can again connect with the present moment sensations of body, breath, just as a skillful means to be present. So that's the process, and it becomes more refined by itself, but definitely the simplicity of observing whatever happens. And the observer is calm. That's correct. And the observer isn't a thing in and of itself. It also, we can perceive that to become more and more refined as mind calms. Observing, there is actually ultimately no observer. It's just knowing, awareness, inherent awareness that knows and sees things as they are. So, dear Ayya Jitindriya, please could you reconcile the concept of metta practice with the practice of simply meeting things as they are, like you said? So I'm not sure if you've listened to my meditations on our website. I've got a series of meditations called, I think it's called Embodying Awareness and Metta. So if you haven't heard those, then please listen in, because that talks about metta, or the process of meeting things as they are, and what acceptance is, and essentially that being metta. Now, your question might be coming out of those, being aware of those meditations, and you're wanting more of a refined understanding. I don't think there's much, personally, to reconcile with metta practice, meaning meeting things as they are, because essentially the metta is, metta means loving kindness. Maitri, it comes from the Sanskrit maitri, which means friendliness. So a friend is open to another. And in its openness to another, it's caring, it's accepting, it's non-judgmental. So if you think of metta in terms of friendliness, it's like it's not making an enemy of whatever presents. Even though there might be the wisdom of discernment that, saying, well, this is anger and this is suffering and this is pleasant, this is unpleasant. But the quality of metta, or the heart of metta, the mind state of metta, can meet those things as they are. Now, our conditioned mind will want to shut down to the unpleasant. Anger is unpleasant. Lots of things are unpleasant. Pain is unpleasant. And so awareness begins to observe what the shutting down mind looks like. It's like shutting down, resisting, not wanting. These are expressions essentially of aversion, contraction. So what metta does, it even meets that as it is, meets the contraction as it is. So, right. We don't try to push past it. It meets the pain of, the unpleasantness of physical pain, or the unpleasantness of anger. It feels that, it can feel that just as it is. So it is, in this regard, it's like awareness. This metta is enmeshed with awareness itself. It can see things and feel things as they are. Metta, karuna, compassion, very close. not afraid to feel things as they are. And in that direct knowing, without judgment, which is an acceptance, things open out. The mind opens out, these unpleasant, tight experiences open out, or they cease, disperse by themselves. And then the wisdom mind learns that these more negative mind states or unpleasant mind states are actually perpetuated by the resisting, the habitual resisting. So by understanding this, we have more confidence in that state of openness. Meeting things as they are means a way to help us meet things as they are is to breathe with things as we experience them. It's okay to breathe with this because our habitual mind, in shutting down, not wanting to feel, it holds breath, suspends breath, reduces breath, makes breath shallow. So a way to undermine, very gently undermine that habitual tendency is to ask, can I breathe with this just as it is? And we're talking about these internal mind states and experiences. So it's a process. And those meditations on our website that I mentioned can guide you through these things. So I see your second part of your question, a few paragraphs down, says it just seems like subtle aversion. So how to understand them in correct perspective? Yeah, so that's exactly what I was saying. The subtle aversion is the contraction and pushing away. So first open to that, recognize, oh, that's what's happening. Contraction, aversion, resistance, unpleasantness in that. Breathe with it. And then the states change as soon as the resistance softens. So that's interesting in and of itself. The states are born and perpetuated from this habitual resistance. Is it correct to say that Mahayana is emphasizing practicing compassion more than the Theravada school to tame the ego mind? I'm thinking especially about the Bodhisattva ideal and bodhicitta. Yes, it's generally so. The Mahayana school emphasizes compassion straight up with the cultivation of bodhicitta. But it's not that the Theravada school doesn't, or the Pali Buddha doesn't. Throughout the scriptures, the Buddha is continually talking about harmlessness, or ahimsa in the Pali and Sanskrit. Ahimsa means harmlessness, but essentially also means love, the state of love that cannot do harm, as the basis for the wholesome state of a wanderer or a practitioner or renunciate. This is the state we should be training ourselves in, and the encouragement to cultivate metta, loving kindness, compassion, which is akin to the Mahayana term bodhicitta. And bodhicitta, that's a compound word. Chitta is the heart or mind. Bodhi is awakening. So we're cultivating the heart of awakening, bodhicitta, which is exactly what the Pali Buddha is talking about. We're cultivating that intention of awakening. Everything we're doing within our life is inclining in that direction. And the Mahayana says we cultivate this intention for the benefit of all beings, not just for my own awakening, but for the awakening of all beings. And that's also implicit within the Theravada and the Pali suttas, that whilst we walk the path as individuals, these wholesome states that are being generated are of benefit for all beings. And we notice that ourselves, when this heart is relieved of unwholesome states, as I said before, there's no desire to harm. there's, and it cannot but affect the environment we're in. That everything we do, say, speak, think, whatever we cultivate in our life affects here and all around. And the Pali Buddha as well puts a lot of emphasis on developing metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, these boundless states of mind, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. This is a basic practice for Theravada practitioners. And the way that that's cultivated is that it's boundless. Above, below, around, everywhere, may all beings be happy, be free of suffering. Recognize the joy that is sorrowless, to recognize equanimity, serenity, the true nature of mind. So although once these schools have been formulated into this is Theravada, this is Mahayana, this is Vajrayana, then this school has that characteristics, this has that characteristics, and that has that characteristics, and then we make differences. This only does that, this only does that, this only does that. And then you perpetuate that through the centuries, and you have all these different scholastic treatises talking about this, that, and that. And it's just this huge tree which with millions of branches speaking of all the differences. But really it comes from the one tap root. So it seems like, and especially now because you can get your answers quick on AI, and AI does the summary of what it finds from anyone's commentaries on the net, give you a quick summary. This is like this is like that is like that. And so we just start to think there's all these differences, but they all find their home in the one mind. There's only one reality, one truth, different emphases, ways of expression, learned concepts. They mean only what we think they mean. But when you understand the nature of mind, you go beyond that conceptual limitation. So I hope that's helpful. I was wondering, the same thing about the birds. Magpies don't sound that beautiful in Europe. The ones that I've heard are coarse and screechy. I love magpies though, very good. Yeah, the magpies have a lovely warble down under. Okay, so just jumped forward a bit. I'm just scrolling back. Okay, there's quite a few more questions here. Ooh, might not be able to get through them all. Okay. Can you comment, I think it says, on equanimity in the midst of suffering? Yes, well, we can't force equanimity like anything. We can't make it happen. But actually, the Buddha talked about equanimity emerging from wisdom, understanding karma, cause and effect, in one regard. So we can contemplate cause and effect a bit like using that analogy I used earlier of the weather. When a storm front comes through, we might not like it, we may not want it, we might be afraid of the suffering, of the damage that it could cause. We might experience contraction in regards to it. But once we realize that there's nothing we can do about that, it has its own causes and conditions, the weather front has come through, is it helpful for me to be contracted in fear and not wanting this, wishing it would go away? Or is it a more skillful state to recognize, okay, this is here now. It'll run its course. How to accept this as it is. It doesn't mean we don't take measures to, maybe if it's a dangerous storm, we have to do things like make the house secure, make the yard secure as possible. We might have to seek refuge somewhere. We do all that. But internally, we can be equanimous because we see that, not because we generate an equanimous state, but because we've reflected on cause and effect and see that we can't fight the storm front. We can take measures to ameliorate any potential damage, and we do that. But internally, we can be equanimous because we've seen the cause and effect nature of things. So if you apply this to situations in the world where we might not feel equanimous, or situations in our relational life, by reflecting on cause and effect, we can recognize where we can help and where we can't help right now. That might change from moment to moment, so we stay aware, but to not suffer because of not wanting and resisting and fearing, because now you've understood the limits, the limitations, karmic limitations, and the cause and effect. It doesn't mean we don't stay responsive. This is where people fear, think, oh, I can't just do nothing. If I just accept it, I won't do anything to make things better. It's not that. But it's not coming from an idea that I should, or coming out of fear that I don't want it this way. It comes more from staying responsive and aware and not inducing more suffering. So that's one way of experiencing equanimity in the midst of suffering. And then you'll find your experience of suffering changes. We don't condone what is happening externally, and yet there can be no extra suffering internally because of it, due to that wisdom and that equanimity. But it remains responsive and it remains compassionate. It doesn't ever get caught in a disinterested or a dissociated or indifferent state. These are called the near enemies of equanimity. We might think we're equanimous, but we're shut down to some degree. It's not operating from wisdom. And the other approach to equanimity is moving through the cultivations of the Brahma Viharas that I just talked about. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity in meditative cultivation, such that you can come to a state of equanimity in the midst of, say, outward situations of suffering, whether it's personally or in society. And that state of equanimity can actually bring blessings into the world around you. And equanimity is the springboard to awakening, really, when the mind is truly finds equanimity. That observer and that wisdom sees very clearly the nature of things. Someone says, it's hard for me to let go of the idea of meditation while meditating. At the same time, I don't want to desire to not be distracted. So I get distracted by not trying to be distracted. Yeah, this is just the activity of the mind. It's always trying to find a position in relationship to something. But it's a subtle doing. It's just that doing. And you just keep seeing it. It just becomes apparent When you learn to rest in awareness itself, recognize awareness itself, and know it is the nature of mind, that you don't have to do it, you don't have to be aware or maintain awareness. Initially, we say bring awareness to the body or the breath as a means to unhook from mental activity, but then that blossoms or allows the mind to open in a way such that the awareness you're resting into is not a construction. It's not a directed thing, but that's very natural. So in the meantime, you're just recognizing the different flavors of doing in the mind. You see it as a doing and let it be. In different ways you can say this: let it be, let it go, but don't make that into a doing. The seeing is the relaxing. And ultimately you notice the seeing seems to be located in the eyes, and that gets relaxed. So all these levels of experience, subtle tension, just gradually get relaxed in the seeing and the knowing until it all just settles out. But don't even make that idea of a process of the way things should go in meditation as create that into an agenda. Because whatever the meditation, we're just calling meditation the time you take to let the body be still and remove attention from your daily activities, to just be in the present with body and breath and notice how things are. The intention to relax and open and be, just be. Keep it as simple as possible. Otherwise, the doing mind will keep thinking, I'm doing this. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And that'll carry on for a while until, because the deeper layers of being are recognized as less stressful, less stressful, less stressful. I meditate 2 to 3 hours every morning, but seem to have reached a plateau. Should I be seeking a guru? Not necessarily. Just observe plateau. As I was saying, it doesn't have to be this continuous progression. Almost in that I seem to have reached a plateau is the mind thinking, okay, it's getting a bit bored. What to do now? Shouldn't it be getting better? Shouldn't I be getting insights? It's still seeking something. So you just recognize that seeking, or that thinking is just a moment of movement. Now you're awake to it. Let the meditation be as it is. And someone says, yes, the guru should seek you. There's those various pointings from various sages. One Rumi, one Lao Tzu, and there's others say that that which is seeking, or that which you are seeking, is seeking you. Or that which you are seeking, or that which is seeking, is the sought. So it's kind of bringing the attention back to this now. There's nothing you can do, there's no cure, is another way of letting go. Nothing to do, nowhere to go, no one to be. No cure, no suffering. Just dropping those relative discernments and judgments, the way where self is still perpetuating, or this notion of I am is still perpetuating a subtle agenda. Why? Because it's still looking for something else. How much of a role does the physical body have in meditation and awareness? For example, Dhamma Chakra Mudra feels very calming during meditation. and seems to help to bring regulation of feelings. Yes, well, in a relative sense, the posture is really helpful. Something upright, something balanced, where the energies of the body can come into balance. So I always find a cross-legged position on the floor, not lotus, I can't do lotus, but just a relaxed position, quite calming and balancing. But then that's how I've always done meditation. But in this last few years, I can't always sit like that because of pain in the hips or the back. So you find whatever position is comfortable. But I certainly notice that the cross-legged position is somehow containing the energies. If my feet are pointing out, the energies are more moving out. So there's different ways. But it doesn't, from an ultimate perspective, it doesn't affect awareness itself. This is really in the realm of certain conditions that can be helpful for settling. But the realization of awareness itself is not dependent on such conditions, and awareness itself isn't. And often it depends what we get habituated to as well. That, if we always sit in front of a particular shrine, that can be helpful for gathering attention, sitting in a particular way, gathering attention. So mind moves within habit patterns. So these habit patterns we can create can be helpful for calm, concentration. But in the end, one moves beyond them anyway. No, I'm not sure if this is half a question, Cynthia. I've got requested that I could see Ma and everything, then that I could see everything as Ma. Then I requested that I could see Ma and me. Then I requested that I could see I am Ma. Is the request enough? So I'm afraid I don't know if that was connected to an earlier question. Maybe to the benevolent forces in the universe, calling on benevolent forces, maybe that was that. Requesting is, in this sense, is a pointing of attention. So it's intention pointing attention. So it's being pointed to something skillful, if you like, bringing up images. This is still obviously within the realm of conditions. If you find these conditions helpful for bringing the mind to some degree of one-pointedness and stillness, that's good. But there's nothing intrinsically true about these conditions, intention, attention. There's ways which we can move intention and attention which can bring helpful conditions for settling, for the mind to settle and open. But the seeing itself or realization is a natural seeing that is not dependent on these conditions. But we can use skillful means to support a process as long as there's we see through any attachment to such skillful means. Doesn't mean we don't use them again, but they're not necessarily in and of themselves the true way, but they're skillful means. And sometimes they might not work either. So we recognize that because they're conditions. So, uncontrived pureness, just wondering about the primal nature of loneliness, how that impacts us individually. How does that relate to uncontrived pureness? So I'll take the question itself. Just wondering about the primal nature of loneliness. How does that impact us individually? Whether we call it a primal nature, I'm not sure if it's a primal nature, loneliness. There's aloneness, an experience of aloneness. I wouldn't even call that primal nature necessarily. Maybe you're bringing up this question in relation to dualistic and non-dual, but loneliness is an emotional state, usually born of a sense of isolation or a sense of separateness. Sometimes a sense of boredom or a need for relationship. We all have need for relationship on that conditioned level as human beings. So meeting loneliness as it is. Loneliness is an emotional state. It's not a permanent state. And if you meet it as it is, it can actually transform into aloneness, which can transform into oneness. It's about how we meet it. We can become identified with the feeling of loneliness, and then that becomes more contracted or impacted, and we search for solutions to our loneliness as an ego, rather than just meeting this emotional state as it is and recognizing how that can change from understanding the nature of this emotional state and the nature of the mind itself. Mind itself is beyond loneliness and aloneness in its true nature. There's no separation. So Jay says the ego needs calming and cure in meditation and none. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Yes, well, we all rely on skillful means, which is perfectly fine, and it's helpful for as long as the mind needs them. But in full realization, the mind is no longer relying on any skillful means. Mind is a torture device. It can be, if you get stuck in the habitual patterns of mind. Because Ajahn Buddhadasa has this wonderful, said something that was wonderfully quoted. I'll try and get the words right. It says, dukkha, suffering, I use the word torture, said suffering, something like suffering is self-inflicted torture that comes from a mind clinging to self, clinging to the idea of me and mine. Yeah, I think it is called dukkha, was self-torture, coming from clinging to I and mine, which is the message, the essential message of the Buddha. When embodying the posture of leadership, what are we leading and what might we lead our community team to? I think that might be a question for yourself. There's a lot of questions in there. What are we leading and what might we be leading our community to? I mean, you don't have to adopt a posture of leadership. Leadership can happen if you find yourself in that position. And if you embodying that position with wisdom and compassion, you'd be leading your community or team to the same. I guess whatever leader embodies a particular something, they will lead their community to that same thing. That's my assessment. Whether it be for benefit or harm. Can you talk about the difference between progress in practice and the jump to stream entry? Well, again, these are concepts. And I wouldn't even say there's necessarily a difference between progress in practice and the jump to stream entry. I mean, stream entry, it's an insight moment which actually cuts away a certain level of delusion, which means there's a glimpse of the unconditioned nature of mind, of the deathless, to the degree that it undermines or removes a previous attachment to this body and mind as self. So not all of that attachment goes, but having seen the deathless, understood the deathless nature of mind in a moment of deep insight, means that you can't believe the mind 100% anymore in the way it gets caught in identity, self-identity and suffering. Although it will still suffer and still get caught, you can't believe that 100% anymore. And so the Buddha said a very large has dropped out of your life experience. But there's still, this isn't the full awakening. So there's still delusion can take hold, and desire and aversion hasn't been undercut very much. There's still, in some sense, more progress to be made there, more to be understood. But every little insight in practice is what we call progress. But I don't like, even though I use the word progress several times today, I don't usually use the word progress very much because it creates this sense of going somewhere that's better. And that sets up this whole concept, which fuels the spiritual doer, the spiritual ego. I've got to get somewhere else, which is the basic mistake, the basic delusion that we're undoing in practice, or that's being undone in practice, not by doing, but by seeing. I would love to get your thoughts on the parallels of the Chan Buddhist tradition and of Hua Do, which is like a koan, and the Advaita tradition using self-inquiry. They're just different means of self-inquiry. The Hua Do or the koan creates a specific question. These questions, I believe, have usually come from realized masters, maybe something they've used themselves that they suggest a student practice with. The question, which is repeatedly asked, it's like a pointing of attention to this conundrum. The Hua Do or the koan are not questions to be answered to find the perfect answer. They bring the attention of the mind to a point, the questioning to the point of what's sometimes called the mind source, either where the question is emerging from or to that space of not knowing. When we ask a question, just like now, I could say to you, what is the sound of one hand clapping? This is a typical Zen koan. When we bring attention to the question, at the end of the question, there's this space in the mind, as if the mind postures into openness to either receive an answer or to connect with some understanding or to listen. It's connecting with a space of non-conceptual awareness, the don't-know mind or the not-knowing mind. And there's a kind of a waiting and openness, a listening, a receptivity there. Some intuitive wisdom may arise, or just have to plug in here, or not. We become familiar with the space of unknowing, the nature of the non-conceptual mind. Ramana the advice, self-inquiry, the question, who am I? Or to whom does this thought arise? Turns the attention of the mind back to the source mind from which the question arose, which is equally open, empty, aware, non-conceptual. So in this space, in this inquiry, whether it's the koan, the huato, or the self-inquiry technique, it directs attention to this naturally spacious, open, receptive mind, which is naturally aware. This is true nature of mind, but it may not be realized in that direct moment because of the subtle activity of searching, desire, aversion, the subtle activity of ego. But the idea is the more the mind is directed there, it learns to settle, and that subtleness of activity is gradually dispelled in awareness itself, or seen through as not worth clinging to, holding on to, following. So this is the method. Is guided meditation a crutch? Is it important to one's practice to increase silent meditation? Guided meditation is a skillful means. All skillful means are crutches to some degree. They're very helpful because for most of us, our chattering mind, our habitual thinking mind can be quite hard to break through. So using a guided meditation can bring your mind quickly to a place of receptivity and silence. And then you can practice just at the end of that guided meditation, turn off the whatever you're listening to and just be there yourself without any more guidance. Just be in that space and let the meditation continue. This is a way of learning. You know, it's kind of you get a lift halfway and then you walk the rest of the way yourself. Really helpful. Or listen to Dharma teachings, listen to wisdom of the masters, and then when the recording is finished, you turn it off and you stay present, continue your meditation yourself. Quite helpful because your mind's being directed in the same way as I spoke about self-inquiry. It's being directed by these profound Dharma teachings. So you're coming into recognizing truth and awareness very in an assisted way. Why not get a lift if you can? Right? Do you want to walk the whole way if there's a lift coming by? We can do that. We can. And we learn a lot too. But sometimes a lift is extremely helpful. That's what teachers are all about, right? Okay, getting to the end here. Let's just take the last question, I think. I've been experiencing more gratefulness while practicing, but I also fear being attached to what I am grateful for. It feels good, but I don't know if it is actually an obstacle to letting go or desire. That's all right. You don't feel gratefulness when it's there and recognize the fear when it comes up. Actually, the fear is where is the attachment, not the gratitude. Yeah, so just see the fear as it emerges, what it does, and it'll dissolve in awareness itself. You don't have to do it. The ego doesn't have to do any of this. If there is no self, for whose sake is Mahayana awakening? It's for the sake of those trapped in the sense of self and samsara. All teachings, all pointings are for the sake of those suffering. When there's no suffering, no longer any suffering, no problem. No need to use crutches. Okay. I'll see if I just move through these last few questions. Apologies if this is redundant. It seems like seeing things as pleasant or unpleasant serves a purpose in life, at least for some of the time. That's right. So we use our wisdom in life. Pleasant, unpleasant is natural to things in life. Wanting more of the pleasant, wanting pleasant all of the time, trying to get rid of the unpleasant is suffering upon suffering. And that's where your discernment needs to see how that is so. I experience piti or joy, occasional jhanic meditative states, but I've grown attached and feel uneasy when they fade. How can I relate to them without fear or craving and stay balanced in practice? Once again, just see that uneasiness that you feel when they fade. That's all you have to do. That uneasiness is the dukkha of clinging. Just see that as it is. See the dukkha in that. You don't have to identify with that either. Just see things as they are, and things will sort themselves out. Just be aware. You see that these meditation states are conditioned and they end. The Buddha pointed out very clearly, they're conditioned and they end, so they cannot be relied upon. They're part of the impermanent nature of things, insubstantial nature of things. And the mind that truly realizes that will understand and free itself. Is this experience related to Kundalini? I feel devotion to this energy as a goddess, but it leaves me unbalanced. How can I relate to it skillfully? Okay, so that's in relation to the jhanic states and piti. Yeah, okay, maybe the devotion to the energy as a goddess is where the imbalance is, and devotion may be masking the craving. I love this. We can recognize the beauty, the calmness, the pleasantness of these states. It's natural, feels pleasant, but when you recognize that clinging or that sense of unbalancedness, that's the important thing to see there. These states will come and go by themselves. And that which knows that no longer clings, eventually doesn't cling. There's a higher happiness in the non-clinging. And with that, we've come to the end of our questions today. So thank you, everybody, for your participation. Thank you for your questions and your comments, which I don't read out your comments because we've got limited time, but I do read them and appreciate them. So thank you very much. So in 3 weeks' time, we'll have Samaneri Jayasara doing the live stream again. And in the meantime, wishing you all well. And whatever your circumstance, wherever you are, try to embody these principles that we're talking about in an easeful way. The non-doing, the meeting things as they are, isn't a passiveness, it's a responsiveness from wisdom and compassion, and a recognition of inherent awareness, the wisdom and compassion of inherent awareness. So with those thoughts, I'll leave you today. Take good care. Much love to you all and see you soon. Bye.